So we're going to talk about your posture because it is kind of a foundation for if you feel well or if you feel in pain. How you stand, sit, and walk is, can greatly affect how you feel. So I want you to start with your feet, and everything can be far more complicated and in depth than what I'm talking about, but these are some basics that will really help things like lower back pain and knee pain and all kinds of pain. So starting with your feet, I'd like you to think of your feet like the number 11. So the heels in line with the space between your first and second toe. Now that's relatively specific and all bodies are different. So if you find that your feet are maybe just a tiny bit turned out when you're standing and that's most comfortable, no big deal. But if you find that you stand very externally rotated, what you also might find is that you have a tendency towards hip and lower back pain. You also might have knee pain because that starts to shift the weight forward in your foot, which puts stress on your knee. It causes all other kinds of core connection issues. So if you are standing like this or with one foot turned out, it is good to at least be aware to a certain extent and bring those feet back underneath you, because we're like kind of a moving building or machine where we're engineered in a certain way that is most efficient if we're loaded on our heels, and if you turn your feet out, you end up starting to load the inner arch, and the arch collapses and the whole structure of the body, a weight bearing of the body is thrown off. So feet parallel and weight over the heels. So I'd like you to do a little experiential exercise with me. I'd like you to keep your feet on the ground, so no lifting the toes or the heels, but close your eyes so you can feel your body a little more. And then shift the weight forward just until you feel your toes grip the floor, and just stay here for a moment. So you notice the balls of your feet have a bit of pressure. Pay attention to the feeling in your knees, your quads, and your lower back. There shouldn't be any major discomfort, but I want you to notice those areas. And then shift the weight back into the heels and feel how your kneecaps can relax down and your quads can relax. And there should be a little bit more of a sense of connection from your heels through the back of your leg and glutes. That loading of the heels will allow the glutes and hamstrings to work more, and utilizing the quads a little less will take stress off of your knees. And this position will also take pressure out of your lower back. You'll feel an opening in the lower back, the lumbar spine. So we're going to try that again. I want you to just bring your feet into parallel, lean the body weight forward just until you feel that gripping of the forefoot and the quads, and it shouldn't cause any pain in your lower back, but you might feel a little compression in the spine. And then when you bring your weight back over your heels, your quadriceps can relax. You may notice that subtle connection from heels through the back of your legs and glutes, and a more open sensation in the lower back. Now, that is more subtle, too subtle sometimes for people to feel, but in my experience, when I take people through that exercise, 80 to 90% of the people feel at least some of, if not most or all of what I'm talking about. And so I want you to just feel where it feels better to stand. And so that will also affect where your pelvis and rib cage and your shoulders and head sit, just where you're leaning your body weight. But another thing that people do commonly is lift their rib cage for a sense of good posture. And what that causes is a back bend, and it also changes the relationship of your spine and ribs to your shoulders and head. So then what you're really doing is encouraging a tipped forward shoulder in relationship to your rib cage. So this isn't good posture, but I think some of us are subconsciously trained to feel that it is. So when I take a yoga class, I see a lot of people standing like this and doing their sun salutations like this. And if you mean to do a back bend, that's totally fine, but to feel upright in that position, it's truly a back bend, and over time it creates a ton of pressure in your thoracic spine. And what it also does is lock down your breathing mechanism. So your ribs are meant to expand like an accordion in all directions, not just the front, but the sides and the back. And as soon as you start to scrunch these muscles and just splay open the front rib cage, when you're breathing, you are no longer expanding and contracting through the back and side ribs. And what that causes is more shallow breath and a very tight spine, because the breath expanding and contracting the rib cage is keeping the vertebrae that they're attached to, the ribs are attached to, kind of gently moving all day long. So you really want that settled feeling where your sternum and your ribs are relaxed down. And so this should feel very easy and soft. Your belly does not have to feel tight to have a good core connection. It can feel relaxed, and it will know when to work when you pick something up, and we will train it to know better. But the first thing you have to do in order to feel a good core connection is not overuse the spinal erectors and disconnect the belly. We want to bring the front ribs down more towards the pelvis, allow the sternum to sink. And of course, you're not going to be thinking about this all day long, but if you notice, oh, I'm standing with my ribs open, or I'm standing in one foot a lot all the time, or I'm walking with my feet turned out, you notice that that might contribute to a pain pattern in your body. And if you start to make subtle awareness changes, over time you'll start to load a little bit more parallel, a little bit more of the heels, you'll relax that upper back, and it will lead to wonderful openings in your body. So the last thing will kind of happen naturally if you do those things, which is that if we drop the ribs down, then usually we feel a little bit forward because our head has been used to being in this kind of relationship with the rib cage. So the neck will start to regain that little curve instead of being straight and jutting forward, which it has to be in order to look forward if your ribs are lifted. If you drop your ribs, you may notice that your gaze feels like it's downward, but we just have to allow, and that will happen naturally because you want to look in front of you. We have to allow your eye gaze forward, and then your shoulders will just hang, and you don't have to think about squeezing them back or squeezing them down. Movement is wonderful, but as far as where to put them, it should be so easy you don't have to think about it. And if you kind of allow your back and your belly to be in the more comfortable place, that sigh of relief is how I usually get people there. Then usually you're already loading your body better, staying over the heels, feet parallel, rib cage relaxed. Okay, so sitting is part of posture, and generally it's the same principles. You kind of want your ear and your shoulder over your pelvis, and if you're standing, it's over your feet. But if it's on your tushy, then you want it to be on the sits bones. I'm sitting on the ground, but you could be sitting in a chair applying the same idea. So if you're lifting your rib cage, this is a back bend, and I just want you to differentiate that from allowing the back muscles to relax a little more, allowing the belly to be a little softer, but I'm not so rounded that I'm behind my sits bones. So the sits bones are the bony protrusions in your tush, the ischium, and you just want to feel like you're loading the body weight on those the same way you would your heels. So just feeling that relaxed feeling here will allow, again, your shoulders and your head to rest in a more natural place, and your body weight rests on top of the bony structures that are designed to bear the weight in sitting, so that you don't overuse your spinal erectors and feel a lot of achiness in your back over time sitting. The last thing I want you to think about is the walking is pertaining to the same rules or guidelines as standing, which is that you kind of want to point your feet in the direction that you're walking. So if you notice that you're starting to turn your feet out a lot, you will, if you haven't already, most likely develop some pain in your lower back, your hips, your knees. So just trying to guide your toes in the same direction your eyes are going is a good rule of thumb. People who walk for fitness, what I usually suggest is that you think about it for the first few minutes. You walk mindfully, you kind of allow your body to be more conscious in each step. You can't think about it every step. It's totally unreasonable. But if you make that suggestion in the beginning of your walk and maybe involuntarily notice a few times during your walk, oh, my feet are doing well, or oh, I might need to pay a little more attention to that connection to keep the feet forward, it will yield amazing benefits. Those are the kind of small changes that make a big difference in your body over time. Another important thing while walking and in daily life that you should consider is your footwear. Your footwear will greatly alter your posture and also how your feet work. And your feet are a very complicated and magical system that are very thwarted by most footwear. So when you're especially walking long distances for fitness, it's important to look for a zero drop shoe, meaning that the heel is not higher than the toes, and that will allow the ankle to behave more functionally, and the foot to behave more functionally. And the other thing is that your shoe is flexible enough that your foot can roll. So a lot of popular shoes have so much structure built into them that your feet kind of act like hooves, and you're not able to get that flexible movement through the foot. The toes aren't able to spread out, the heels are a little lifted, so it's like you're walking downhill all the time, and that tightens your ankle and changes your gait and makes your feet kind of fall asleep. So those are all things that over time can affect everything else from the ground up. So when you're choosing your walking shoe, a nice flexible shoe that has a zero drop or heel the same height as the ball of the foot is going to be most beneficial to build the proper musculature when you're walking. So parallel feet and good shoes. And when you're wearing the naughty shoes, take care of your feet, roll them out, and do some ankle stretches and some movement, and kind of acknowledge that your feet are the foundation, they're the connection for your body to the ground, and they deserve probably much more attention than most of us give them.